Welcome back to the DrupalEasy podcast. This is season 14, episode 5, and I am your host, Mike Anello. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Rod Martin about how to be a software trainer. Now, both Rod and I have been software trainers for more years than either of us can count, and in this episode, we're going to talk about how other folks can get more comfortable teaching software. We're going to share some of our lessons learned, maybe a horror story or two along the way. It turned out to be a really fun conversation. Before we get to that, let me tell you a little bit about our long-form training courses here at DrupalEasy. Our beginner-focused class, Drupal Career Online, that's 12 weeks, twice a week, plus some office hours. That begins February 13th. You can learn more either at drupaleasy.com/DCO, or you can register for one of our upcoming free 1-hour Taste of Drupal webinars where we attempt to answer all of your questions about Drupal Career Online. We're also super excited to be debuting our newest long-form course, and heavy on the long. It's called Professional Module Development. It's 90 hours of curriculum over 15 weeks. There's also a light version, a little bit shorter. We cut out a few topics, a little bit less expensive. The full version begins on January 31st. You can check that out at drupaleasy.com/PMD. Rod Martin, welcome back to the DrupalEasy podcast. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thanks for having me back, Mike.
Sure. So today we're going to be answering the question of how to be a software trainer. And you, my friend, like me, are indeed a software trainer. Correct me if I'm wrong there, right?
I am mostly Drupal, still do a little bit of Joomla and WordPress, but 95% Drupal now.
So I want to make this like super pragmatic discussion.
Right.
But I'm curious because I don't know if I know the answer to this, but how did you get started?
Wow. So I've been teaching stuff since I finished my master's program. I've been teaching at various universities. I've taught at the master's level. So yeah, I've done teaching and training pretty much my entire career since I finished school. But about 11 years ago, Steve Burge from OS Training approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to do some training in open source software, specifically WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal?" And I said, "That sounds like fun." It just hit at the right time. And so we attended our first DrupalCon at DrupalCon Chicago. And then we started doing the absolute beginner's guide to the training day beforehand. And he brought me on staff, and I've been making videos and teaching people ever since. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So we want to talk about, you and I could probably just talk about, Drupal training, and it'd be a very small group of people who'd be interested in that conversation.
Right.
So I was thinking that maybe
Expand that.
we can expand that a little bit,
Sure.
and we'll talk about that stuff a little bit. But I think I kind of want to focus a little bit more on what it takes to, deliver a good training, and not necessarily like classroom style or even, public Zoom trainings, but maybe focus a little bit more on kind of the smaller, like maybe intercompany trainings,
Okay.
where one person is, you know, uh, teaching two junior developers how to do something.
Right.
Because I think that brings a lot of value. And, not all developers, have that skill to actually, convey information.
Well, that's very true.
Yeah. So, maybe the service that we could provide here over the next 25 minutes or so is, some tips on how to, put yourself in that role of having to teach someone, something technical.
Sounds good.
Yeah, something that you might have, a very high comfort level with, and want to convey and want to instill that level of confidence in someone else. So before we do that, I just want to mention, there's a lot of different kinds of training. Training is kind of a bit of a nebulous word because I think that folks who, write blog posts or books or other written things, that's one type of trainer. There's folks, Rod, one of the things you do is create screencasts. That's definitely
Hmm.
a different type of training, and like those types of trainings are almost like hands off, where you're not talking directly to someone. You
Right.
don't really know who you're talking to. You're producing something, and then folks are consuming that synchronously.
Correct.
And then compare that, of course, with in person or online trainings. And so let me ask you right off the bat, Rod, do you have a preference? Like, do you prefer to teach people face to face? I'm using air quotes that nobody can see, but
Yeah, for sure. Oh, absolutely. So my favorite training is in person in the classroom, for as long as it takes. That's absolutely my favorite. In fact, I was just having this conversation this morning with somebody else about, you know, I think those days are done for the most part, at least in our industry, where virtual training now has taken over, mostly because of COVID, but a lot because of just budgeting and, bringing me in to a city costs money, and then bringing everybody else to that city or even to a location now is something we just don't need to do as much anymore. So I'm not sure live training in the classroom for what we do will ever come back. It might, I don't know, but certainly I prefer. My preference is always live training. I love the interaction. I love the tough questions. For me, that's what I love to do. The asynchronous video training. I I try to keep track. I think I'm at around 1,000 videos now between
oof,
yeah, between Aku Academy, LinkedIn, OS Training, and a bunch of other places. Yeah, I'm probably right around 1,000 Drupal, and then I've got Joomla and WordPress on top of that. So over 10 years, it's been a lot of video training. And again, I get great feedback from that. And people seem to appreciate it. They like being able to go at their own pace. They like being able to pause and rewind the tough parts. So I think obviously there's great value in both. But yeah, definitely. If you're asking me my favorite in a classroom with a group of people where we really get down to it, that's definitely it for me.
well, I think you can still get a little taste of that at community events.
Absolutely. Well, you and I were just at NedCamp for Drupal, and I know we don't want to just focus on Drupal, but you know, being in front of a room of people and being able to present something that you've worked hard on and interacting with people before and after, and yeah, there's nothing like that. That's just fantastic. And as much as we've appreciated having virtual events over the last couple of years, I'm so glad that live in-person events are coming back.
Yeah, there's always a nice, well, I shouldn't say always, but most of the time, there's energy in the room that
Yes.
that everybody
Yeah.
can feed off of.
Really hard to do that over Zoom
Right. Right. Yeah, pretty
or
difficult.
whatever you're using. Yeah.
Right. So, and that kind of ties in. I mean, I think that for, informal kind of, and I'm going to keep using this phrase, intercompany
Yep.
type of training, given the choice, if you could, if you're going to do like an hour Zoom lesson, or you can do an hour of, sharing a desk, or, looking at one laptop over a cup of coffee or something. I think just the ability to be in physical proximity with someone kind of brings a bit more accountability to both people.
Absolutely. Again, I've said this a few times. The Zoom will never replace the room, and being in the room with somebody allows you for, like you said, accountability, a relationship, a much better relationship. Although, again, you can do that over time, meeting with people on camera and things like that, and it's still pretty good. But there's nothing like looking over a laptop or sitting down with somebody, so you can read their body language, read their facial expressions in real time, not have to look over to the side to see their camera if they're actually paying attention or not. But again, as much as I miss that, and as much as I think it's superior, we're very fortunate to live in a day when we have something like Zoom, so we can keep helping people grow and learn, and even if it is just a one-on-two or a one-on-three training for an hour, we're blessed to have that technology for sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably, something that we very much agree on, that given the choice, given the
Yeah,
opportunity, preference, in person, you know,
yeah,
in person training, if you have that option. I mean, I think that it definitely brings something that is not easily described or super tangible, to the table, but I think it does add a lot of value there.
yeah,
All right, so that's kind of that's something that is dependent on. the situation, right? The
Yes.
the location, things like that. But let's focus on the person actually doing the training. So I asked you this in our little rundown. So I'm curious to hear your answers here. So
Yeah.
top three skills that you think a software trainer should have.
Well, this may sound weird or strange, but I think for me, if you're going to teach, you need to be a teacher. I know a lot of amazing, amazing developers who can't explain themselves
Mhm.
for their lives. They're just not built that way.
See, I don't like that
So
answer. You know why I don't like that answer?
why don't you like that answer?
Because I feel like you're not really answering the question. You're just restating the question because now I get to say what makes a good teacher or what gives someone the ability to teach, which is really the
Fair
same
enough.
question I just asked. So, Rod, that
Sure.
one does not count. You get 0 credit for that
All
one.
right. Well, I think all right, then let me start with a different one, and it's one you and I both share. I think a good software trainer needs patience,
Sure.
um,
Yes.
and that's kind of a no-brainer. And
Is
and
it?
again, it goes
Is it a
back to that.
no-brainer though? Is it?
Well, I think it is because again, you and I have both been in enough situations where we have students who either aren't getting it, and you think they should, or they're just not focused enough, and and little peek behind the curtain, you're just sitting there going, "Argh,
Yeah.
why isn't this person at least paying attention?" They're paying for it, but, it comes down to you are the person that sets the tone of the room, whether, again, it's in Zoom or in the room, and so as a trainer, the idea of having patience and you put up empathy as well, and I think that's a really good one.
Mhm.
Just the ability to manage the room and be patient with the outcome because people are, some people really struggle with this stuff, and some people get it. And we've both had students in the same boat, so patience is a big one.
So what do you think the enemy of patience and empathy is when in the
Oh, wow. Your own expectations of getting through the material and expecting people to catch on as fast as you expect them to. It boils down to your attitude as a trainer that you bring to the table. And you've gotta always remember that even if, person A is seemingly just not getting it or not thinking or not paying attention, you don't know their situation, you don't know their background, you don't know what happened this morning. Their dog might have died, they might have had an argument with their spouse or their significant other, and all of this plays into their approach to training, and as a trainer, then you set the expectations, you guide the class, and you try and bring people along no matter what's going on in their lives at the time or even in their environments at the time, and try to bring everybody along together. And that requires patience. Absolutely.
Yeah, when I think about this, I mean, everything you said, I'm on board with, but I think of it more of like the time constraint. It's
Okay.
what is the and I is for me the big enemy of patience.
Yes.
Because if
Yes.
right, if you are sitting down with a coworker and you need to teach them how to build a user migration, for example, and you put it in your calendar for 2 to 3 p.m. and it gets to be 2:45 p.m. and you still have a lot to go,
Yeah.
you're going to sacrifice patience for material,
Exactly.
and the results are probably not going to be great. So I think that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned in however many years that I've been teaching is to do everything I can in my power to not necessarily have that drop dead time constraint,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
which is
That's really
not,
good.
we were talking before we started recording. Like, if you're paid to go to fly to a city and train some team, and they've given you X number of hours on these days of the week, and training has to end at 5 p.m. on a Thursday, but you also have to cover, this list of material.
Hmm.
That's, you know,
Oh, and I face that. Absolutely
oh, it's
face that all the
horrible.
time.
It's a horrible
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
It can be a rough one. In fact, I had that not too long ago where there was definitely a person in the room that was really, really struggling on the 4th and 5th day of the training, and it was obvious, and we were waiting for them on every exercise, and so I dealt with it. I mean, I spoke with the person privately and set expectations for the rest of the training, and I said, "How can I best help you?" And we talked off the rest of the training. And, so we worked out a plan where he'd be able to follow along, and I would make sure at the end of the day to spend extra time and just make sure, you know, he was okay with what we'd covered, even though he may not have been able to finish all the tasks. And that way, at least the rest of the team was able to complete the training. He felt pretty good about it. It's like you said, when you're the trainer, giving that extra amount of time or that extra amount of attention is always number 1, good, and number 2, it's not a big deal for you because it's just a few extra minutes at the end of the day, and so,
Right.
yeah.
What I
Yeah, that's a good point.
what I normally do is I will in those situations where it's a private training, with a group of people, I will ask the client, my main contact with the client, who in the room should dictate the pace,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And like
I've done that.
specifically, like
Yeah,
which person?
yeah. I do that pretty much every time as well. It
Yeah,
it takes all the onus off you.
right.
But, at the same time, sometimes they're just not willing to confront the elephant in the room
Well,
either,
yeah.
so it
That
can be tough.
that's a whole other that's more of a client management situation.
Yeah.
All right. Any other
Yeah.
skills you wanna mention?
So I think a trainer needs to go in with the appropriate level mindset. So I do a lot of beginner training. This might be their very first exposure to the software, to even the concepts that we're hitting. So I remind myself before I go into training every single day, begin with a beginner mindset. Keep the beginner mindset. Don't go off and start using jargon I haven't explained. Don't say, "Oh, this is simple," when for somebody in the room it may not be. So I really that's just one of my little things. I often will remind myself, just make sure you're at the appropriate level mindset, whatever that level is, whether it's intermediate, advanced, or whatever. Don't treat them like they're beginners if they're not, and don't treat them like they're advanced if they're not. So, yeah, for me, that's a constant reminder.
How about, challenges? Like, what are the
Yeah,
what are the most common challenges that you face, when you're
yeah.
trying to
So
teach someone a new technical skill?
interesting. It's the technology is one of my challenges.
That's which is
So
kind of
I've
counterintuitive.
I know, isn't it? It's funny, right? So now that we're not in the room and we're on things like Zoom, I've had the internet fail in my building here in town. So I literally hooked my computer up to my phone and did the rest of the training over cellular. People's technology is far bigger. Like I've put together a pretty neat technology stack to do the training that I do, but other people who are coming to the training their technology might not be up to speed. So that is one of the frustrations again when you're not in the room and you can't walk over to somebody's computer and fix it really quickly. It's been fascinating. So I have actually in the last couple of years. I've always built in time just to make sure everybody's tech is doing okay at the beginning of every day, and it's paid off because we can literally just take care of some of that stuff. But that to me, that's one of the funny challenges right now.
Yeah, I think not
Um,
even at the beginning of the day, it's such a big focus for us in
yeah,
well, us, I'm speaking about DrupalEasy, especially in our beginner class.
right.
The 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the class,
Yeah,
I spend
yeah,
a lot of time just making sure everyone has the right software installed and everything's running at the appropriate performance level because nothing puts the brakes on whether it's a one-on-one training or a group training or something at a Drupal event. Then 15 minutes in, someone's site just doesn't work
yeah.
or that's
Or even as simple as, I do a lot of federal government training because Drupal, of course, is
oh
big in
yeah,
the
I
federal
know where you're
government
about to
space,
I
and
know where you're going with this one.
oh my stars, their computers are so locked down,
Right,
and they can't even go to Google.
right.
So, those things that we would typically take as easy and normal, their constraints based on their own department policies can really get in the way as well. So
Yeah.
that's definitely one of my challenges. The other one I wrote down, and this is, I think this is true of all trainers, just staying current. I train probably 2 weeks out of every month, so for 40 hours a week. 40 hours on a Zoom call? I mean, I can't even believe
I
people
don't know
sign
how
up
you
for
do
that.
that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's, I've just gotten used to it now, but 'cause I know your training method or, style or schedule is very different than mine. I do
Sure.
1-week chunks, right? And
Yep.
you do the 12-week course,
Yep.
and what an amazing schedule you've got. But that 1-week training is definitely a challenge, 40 hours on Zoom. So, I think, just as much as teaching as I'm doing, just staying current. Drupal 10, again, using the Drupal example, Drupal 10 launches in a couple of weeks,
Yep.
at the time of this recording, and there's a significant amount of change in there, and so updating materials, making sure you know all of the stuff, and every trainer goes through that. No matter what they're teaching, every trainer goes through, unless you're teaching the same thing for the last 20 years, which hopefully you're not, because man, that would be tough. But yeah, I think staying current and making sure you're current. Now, on the other side of that, one of the most fun things for me in training is where I get asked questions I don't know the answers to, which happens every week. You know,
Right.
they'll people ask crazy questions, and I'm sure you're the same way. You use that as a learning opportunity where you go and research the question right in front of them and come up with the answer, and that's a lot of fun. And then, of course, I jot it down for the next time, like you do, I'm sure. But, I think top challenges as far as being a trainer, I think honestly, those are mine. I think for any trainer, you've gotta keep up, you gotta watch your tech, and again, I think goes back to what I said was one of the most important things, keeping that appropriate level mindset, constantly watching that you're not, just throwing out the jargon or boring people to death because it's so beginner and you should have checked their, expertise before you started type thing. So,
Right.
yeah,
And I don't think, at least for me, not very surprisingly, both things that you mentioned, I could boil down to one word, which is preparation.
exactly. Yeah,
Right. So
absolutely.
I think, again, if you are, if you're sitting down with a couple coworkers and you're getting them up to speed on using views contextual filters, even if you are, a views master and, you can, views contextual filters inside and out, I think to effectively, you know, teach that, there's some preparation that's necessary. I think, just coming up with some good examples or maybe like a good like little mini exercise,
Right.
making sure that the people you're going to be teaching have like a clean local site or a clean personal site somewhere that they can play with so that you don't sit down at the top of the hour and say, okay, we're going to use views contextual filters. And then one of the students is like, oh, give me a minute. Let me get a site up and going. And then,
Exactly.
and then you're 10
Oh,
minutes behind
absolutely.
immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, and absolutely gotta be top of the list.
Yeah. Preparation and just put the time in before and the result will be that much better. And again, it doesn't matter if you're you, Rod, and you're, teaching a room full of people, for 40 hours a week, or if, you've been asked by your boss to teach a coworker how to, get Gulp up and running on their machine.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, we agree on that one.
So we've touched on a lot of these already, but let's, forget about all the work that the trainer has to do. Let's put the onus on the student for a little bit.
Sure.
If you're going to attend a training or you're going to be part of a training or you're going to be the recipient of some knowledge in some way, what can students do to kind of prepare themselves to maximize, their intake of the material?
Yeah, so I thought this was a great question, and actually, we've already hit on most of my answers.
I think we have, yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things I hear really often in training, is that, "Oh, hey, I've seen all your YouTube videos," or, "I watched this course on LinkedIn," and I'm starting to get that. It's kind of funny. It's embarrassing. I start to blush every time, but but people who come prepared by watching related material or trying to digest some related material come into training with a far better hope of having their expectations met and having their learning goals accomplished. Now, it's not always necessary, obviously.
Mm.
Like you said, if you're sitting down with a coworker teaching something in Drupal, it's not always necessary that they come in and have watched 20 videos and read 10 articles. But certainly come in with that, if possible, have some homework done ahead of time. And that's partly on the trainer to provide that homework if that's necessary as well. I think the biggest thing I face, again, with my training is calendar and distractions. Because we're on Zoom, I know people are tuning out. I know people are checking their email. I think as a person who's receiving training, try and minimize the distractions. Try and block out the calendar. I know it's not always possible, but make sure you're coming into the training with as much distraction-free an environment as possible because we're not in a room together as much anymore, unless again you're sitting down with a coworker at the same desk. But even then, people stopping by, or you've got your email client open and your chat client open. I did a training a little while ago where during one of the share screens where we were trying to uh, help the person through an issue, 15 notifications from their chat message popped up while I'm looking at their share screen, and it's like, so how focused are you, right? So as much as possible, clear your calendar, turn off your distractions, whatever they may be,
Yeah.
and really pay attention to the training. You're gonna get more out of it for sure. There are those lulls. Of course, there are those lulls where maybe you've accomplished a task and we're waiting on a few other people to finish it, and certainly you could quickly zip off and check your email if that was something you needed to do. But to leave it open all the time, that's going to be a training killer.
Yeah.
Another one I wrote down was sleep. Which for software developers, you know, that's a mixed bag for sure. Especially, if you're in a company and well, again, I had a training a little while ago where they were launching a website in the middle of training. Guys, come on.
Yeah.
You're how on earth can you not be distracted by that or not get enough sleep?
Where do you think the priority is gonna be?
Yeah, exactly, right? So, and again, to get your own tech in order, pay attention to the instructions sent out ahead of time, make sure you're prepared when you come in, and actually give some thought to the mindset you bring to the training. I think sometimes people come into training and they go and they haven't thought about it at all until they sit down and either walk in the room or open up their computer that morning. And the more you can come with an open mindset, a prepared mindset, the more you're going to get out of it for sure. So I think, you know, yeah, those would be my top 5 or 6 things to try and be prepared.
Alright, cool. Let's start wrapping this up a little bit with some
Okay.
hopefully, fun questions here. So, like, what's
Yeah.
your in all of your years of let's has it always been software training when you first started, was it software related?
Over the last 10 years, it's all been software. So, although I've been teaching at, different universities, I taught, technology and education to, people who are gonna be elementary school teachers. I've taught at theological institutions because that's what some of my degrees are in. I've taught at, yeah, introduction to speech, speech 101 kinda classes. So I've always taught at the college or master's level since I graduated. But in the last 10 years, all of the training like we're talking about has been software related, primarily WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal, so
So
and Mautic.
what's an anecdote that you, like, share at a dinner party when someone asks you about, like, what you do, and is it fulfilling, and does it make you happy? Like, what's kind of your go-to little story that you share?
Well, it's kind of like so if this was at a dinner party, I would say something along the lines of, "I just love it when the lights go on above people's heads for something that they're interested in or need." But a more specific story that I would probably share with a smaller group or one on one with somebody would be there have been a few times like this, but one in particular where I got a follow up email after a class where the guy said, You just have no idea how much your training this week impacted me. It's changed my life. And I went, What? Dude, it's software training. He said, No, you don't understand. My job was on the line. I'm at a crossroads, and this week literally has saved not only my job, but I feel like it's given me a new direction. And I think, trainers who teach almost in any area probably have stories like that where somebody came along and they desperately needed you. And, it's such a fulfilling blessing to have that opportunity in people's lives. You don't always hear those kind of stories, but when you do, and when this person came back to me after the training, and he was just so genuine, it was very encouraging. And I get stories. You get stories like that every once in a while, and people are complimentary of the things you've put out there. I did Aqua Engage for Aqua in Miami a couple months ago, and one of the ladies in the class was saying something along those lines. Just, oh, I've watched all your videos. It's so cool to meet you, and I'm blushing the whole time. And I do. I don't do well with that at all. I really don't.
All right, let me bring it
But
back down to reality here, Rod, and,
okay, worst anecdote.
the worst. Yeah.
Okay, so I was doing a Joomla and I'll make this quick because I know we need to wrap up. I was doing an in-person training in Washington, DC, and a lady started screaming at me 15 minutes in, and I'm going like, literally, she was crying, hysterical, screaming at me going, "Why aren't you teaching me what I came to learn?" This is 15 minutes in, for heaven's sakes. So it turns out she was just not prepared. She barely knew what HTML was. She barely knew what a browser was, and she thought she was gonna come in and be able to build a website by the end of the day, and
Uh,
completely unrealistic expectations.
right.
So I took her out of the room and we chatted for a few minutes, and I gave everybody else a quick assignment, and I said, "Come back at 4. I'm gonna give you some basics. I'm gonna give you your money back," 'cause it was probably $2,000 she put into it.
Oof.
"I'm gonna give you your money back, and I'm gonna just spend as much time as you want this afternoon. I'm gonna tell you the basics." So she stopped crying, and like everybody in the room was like shocked and, you know, it was just one of those, right? She came back, and fortunately, you know what? We were able to work it through and help her out, and we became friends for years. This is probably going back about 6 or 7 years ago now. And, but yeah, wow,
That'll
I
throw you for
that
the day,
first
though, for
minutes, it
sure.
was like, "Whew, wow,
Yeah.
what do I do?"
I
That
don't
was
think
a tough one.
I haven't had anything that acute.
Oh, it was dramatic.
Yeah,
Like, I've never seen
that's
anything like it.
something.
She was
Wow.
just so, so gone,
Yeah.
but sweet lady. She was
Yeah.
just in over her head.
So, again, I'm not crazy about that because it started off horribly, but, you ended it very nicely, which,
Well, I try. I mean, I just don't have any horrendous, horrific
Yeah.
stories, It goes back to, experience and being
Right.
willing to help, and I think most trainers are like that. I mean, I've had fire drills where 2 people didn't come back in Washington, DC. It must be a DC thing. We had a fire drill at 10 AM, and 2 women from Arkansas didn't even come back.
Well, that was it. Alright, well, they'd had enough of you. They were looking for a reason
Uh,
to get out.
well, their computers were still in the room. They went shopping at Macy's next door,
Wow.
so I had to go get them.
Oh my.
Yeah, too funny. Anyway.
Alright, let's wrap this up. I got one final question for you. You ready?
Yes, sir.
As far as you know, are there enough people in the Drupal community like you that play hockey, ice hockey, that for us to field a squad? Do you know
For
of
us
at
to feel
least 6 people?
for us to feel what? Sorry, what was that last part?
Field a team. Well, not field, to
Put together a team.
yeah.
You know what? I honestly don't know. I do play ice hockey twice a week. I had 2
You
games
know of
last
others?
night.
Because I know of 2 or 3, including you.
Okay. I know on my profile picture at Drupal.org, I'm in my Drupal 8 hockey jersey that I won at DrupalCon LA. That's my profile picture.
Oh, alright.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know, but boy, that would be fun. Drupal Hockey League.
I'm guessing like the folks at, Digital Echidna, they probably have a few, right? Because that's where the
Yeah, they
hockey
probably
pictures came
would.
from.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep. It did.
Right.
I would imagine they have a few up there.
I know, I don't know if I'm not gonna say his name, but I know someone, from the Southwest US who plays ice
Okay.
hockey as well.
Well,
Um,
I know we're going to Pittsburgh in 2023. We could probably rent the rink and at least go ice skating.
well, we need a goalie. We gotta find a goalie, I think, for the team. Well, I don't play, first of all. I'll just be in the stands, like,
Yeah. Well, hey, at least, maybe not hockey, but maybe we just go ice skating, you
Yeah,
know? I
something.
could
Yeah.
I could help with that. Too
All right.
fun.
Well, thank you very much for your time, sir. Much
Oh, thank
appreciated.
you. This has been fun.
Always
Yeah,
lovely
hopefully it's
chatting with you.
helpful. All right. Thanks, Mike.